Nigga, this is ass.
I need to find the best way to learn math and science.
It's brilliant.org.
Do we continue to exist after the death of the body?
But get to the tier list,
Trying
man.
to figure out whether they're good or bad. Some of the possibilities, and trying to figure out whether they're good or bad. You die, and that's it. Nothing. You cease to exist. Death is the permanent end of experience. Eternal nothingness. This is the most straightforward scenario. Death is the end of life, so the idea that there is life after death is obviously false. Our fear of death is biologically programmed into us, and to an extent it's unavoidable. But maybe philosophy can help us reason our way out of this
This
situation.
is butt.
Is death bad?
Nigga.
Well, you might say
nothing?
that someone died.
That's ass.
Bad because they're not around anymore. That person was there, and now they're not. But I don't think this is actually the key to the badness here. Let me hit you with this thought experiment. Let's say your best friend in the whole world is this guy George. George spent years studying astrophysics, and he's about to go on an expedition to the Andromeda Galaxy to do research there for the rest of his life. You can't follow him there, and once he leaves, there will be no way to communicate with him ever again. That's a bit of a bummer. But now, let's say that instead of leaving, the rocket George is taking explodes immediately after launching, killing him instantly. The outcome is the same from your perspective. George is gone, and you'll never see him again.
But
the situation where the rocket explodes definitely seems worse. So the issue isn't just that George isn't around anymore. There's something important about the fact that George died. Okay, so instead of thinking about George, let's think about me. Death is bad because I won't exist anymore. And personally, I really like existing. Existing is pretty epic. Is it bad for me, though? When I'm dead, I won't exist. So who would it be bad for? It's easy to think that when we die, we enter into a kind of blackness, or void, and we place ourselves into it. It's as if we sink into this pit of nothingness, and we're trapped there forever. We end up in this strange realm, with no thoughts, no sensations, no experience, and this is something that we somehow witness for eternity. But this doesn't really make sense. This is reifying nothingness. The comedian Norm Macdonald once said,
"And then I came to a realization that you and death will never intersect. As long as you're here, death is not. As long as death is there, you are not."
Yeah, but since you know it's coming.
Oh, but you don't want that.
He got this idea from the Greek philosopher Epicurus, who had a similar quote. "So death, the most terrifying of ills, is nothing to us, since so long as we exist, death is not with us. But when death comes, then we do not exist. It does not concern either the living or the dead, since for the former it is not, and for the latter are no more." Okay, but does it actually have to be bad for me for it to still be bad? Things can be bad in different ways. Putting my hand on a hot stove is bad because I'm experiencing the pain and the badness directly.
And
Burning
your
my
skin,
hand is
yeah.
immediately and intrinsically bad. But let's consider a different scenario. Let's say I spend my evening scrolling TikTok.
Oh my God,
The whole time
bro.
I'm mildly entertained. It's a neutral experience. But what if my friends had also invited me out that night? I was scrolling TikTok alone in my room instead of cracking a few cold ones with the boys, which would have been way more fun. That time I spent scrolling wasn't intrinsically bad, but it was bad compared to what I could have been doing instead. This example illustrates the deprivation account of why death might be bad. Not existing isn't bad in an inherent way, but it's bad compared to all the fun, meaningful experiences I could have if I continued to exist.
Right.
Okay, but let's take this non-existing thing a little further. What if I never existed in the first place? Would this be bad? Well, it seems bad for me because I do exist now.
You might be a robot. Fuck.
Runs into some major problems.
No, I'm chatting.
Think about all the possible
That's
people
funny.
that could exist. Let's look at our current generation right now. Let's say there are about 5 billion people who could reproduce, half men and half women. Each man could technically create a new person with each woman. And beyond that, every single egg-sperm combination of each of those pairs would also create a different person. If a different sperm won the race, I wouldn't be the same person I am now. I would be my sibling. As a rough calculation, that's 2.5 billion women times 30 years of reproduction times 12 eggs times 2.5 billion men times 50 years of reproduction times a conservative 365 ejaculations per year times about 40 million sperm per ejaculation.
Is this gay or? Never mind.
That works
I
out
feel
to this
uncomfortable.
number, 15 with 32 zeros. And this is still only a tiny fraction. All of those potential people could also have children with each other. This could go on for potential generation after potential generation. If the deprivation account is true, you have to feel sorry for this infinite amount of people who never got the chance to exist. That seems like a bit too much emotional labor for me. Okay, but we can just fix this by adjusting the deprivation account a little bit. Instead of a deprivation of life, it's a deprivation of a life that actually existed at some point. This seems to have filled the hole I just poked in the argument. But there's still a problem. The section of time after your death isn't the only section of time you don't exist. You also don't exist before you're born. But who really cares about that? If you told me that I'm only going to live to age 50, I would be bummed out, and I would wish that I could live longer. But I don't wish that I was born 50 years earlier. We seem to care more about existing in the future than existing in the past. So to sum things up, non-existence after death is a complicated issue. Personally, I'm sympathetic to the deprivation account. I like existing a lot, but this is also the perspective of a guy who exists, which is definitely biased. I'll put nothingness in B tier.
That's not B tier. That's L.
This is your brain
Nigga,
when you're
how-
struggling to focus. And
Oh,
this is
I
your
gotta
brain
add.
when you're in the zone.
Okay. Yo, come on, bro. This is probably
Ranking heaven in a video like this is a little tricky.
yeah,
Religions
Loki.
that describe a heavenly realm are usually pretty vague about what it's actually like there. It's described as this perfect,
I'm
beautiful
about to say it
place
might
with
be
no pain and suffering,
AS tier.
where we can live in
AES?
bliss
I
and
don't
worship
know.
God for eternity. But is this kind of immortality something we actually want?
Yeah.
The deprivation account might say yes. Not existing is bad, because you'll miss all the fun. So if we live forever, that would be ideal. Well, not exactly. At a certain point, there might not actually be anything interesting for existence to give you. You wouldn't be deprived of anything. Imagine a classic idea of heaven. We all turn into angels and spend eternity singing psalms together or something. Singing psalms is probably pretty fun to do for a while, but doing that for all of eternity seems a little excessive. What kind
We do also have the perspective of. We do have a limited perspective of what it could actually be. So
of life would be worth living forever? This isn't just 100 years, 1,000 years, 1,000,000 years, or 1,000,000,000 years.
Yeah.
This existence has no end.
yeah.
There are some things I love doing. Eating lamb vindaloo, solving Minesweeper puzzles, listening to Beach House, whatever. But after the first 100,000 years of doing that, it would probably get a bit stale. Okay, well let's say you take a different approach, and you try to make the most of your time. You spend 1,000 years writing novels, 1,000 years painting. You learn how to play every single instrument at an expert level. You will always run out of things to do. At some point, you will have done it all. You might be able to fix this problem with some kind of amnesia system. Let's say you get bored after about 1,000 years of doing stuff. At this point, you start to lose your memories and forget what you did a few hundred years ago. By the time you're at 2 billion years, you could barely remember what you spent your time doing as a young 100 million-year-old angel. At this
Young 100. Okay, sorry.
point, you've changed completely. You have different tastes, a different personality, and you spend your time doing things that you wouldn't imagine doing before. But is this really worth it? There is continuity between the young angel me and the old angel me, but is it still really me? I don't even remember the previous me existing at all. My personality is totally different too, and I'm probably hanging out with different angel friends. I don't think I'd want something like this. Alright, but maybe instead of having to try to do interesting things or entertain yourself, you just experience complete bliss for
Yeah,
eternity.
that's what I'm saying. Right?
Maximum pleasure. This seems appealing at first, but it also reminds me of something. There was a study where they attached electrodes to a rat's brain that released an intense burst of pleasure. They hooked this up to a button that the rat could press whenever it wanted. As you might expect, the rat just sat there pressing the button over and over until it died. But I'm not a rat, I'm a human. And it might sound arrogant, but I somehow feel like I'm above that kind of thing. I'd probably really enjoy the intense bliss for the first few thousand years, but then I'd start to think to myself, is this all there is? Okay, so here's a heaven I think would actually be desirable. You can hang out there as long as you want, but the door is open. Once you're satisfied with all the things you've done, you can peace out. This scenario seems pretty good. The problem is we don't really know which of these situations heaven would actually be, and some of these cases are just totally made up to fix the boredom problem. I think the standard understanding of heaven is just that you live forever in a perfect place. If that's the type of heaven we're working with, I'm not a huge fan. C tier.
Yeah. But like, I say S and A tier only because like, I don't know. See, he still has his human desires attached to, like, you're reborn as an angel, are you not? So then as an angel you would be whatever you are. I don't know. It's flaws. I don't know. We just don't know. That's all. Yo, what's good?
Inferno, the first part of Dante's Divine Comedy, is probably the most famous depiction of hell. It has 9 circles.
Nigga, hell? Nigga, this should be... Let me see.
Inferno, the first part of Dante's Divine Comedy, is probably the most famous
nothingness? That's all I know. That shit is garbage. Nigga, we died and there, it's just black. It's just black. Nigga, that's Afterlife.
Or being
that should not be
frozen
B tier, bro.
Even Buddhism has different types of hells with intricate punishments, like the realm of the hungry ghosts. There are a lot of different depictions of what hell would actually be like, so I won't spend too much time on the details here. At least in the biblical tradition, it's important to understand that hell is a very complicated issue. From what I gather, a lot of the colloquial understanding of hell comes from medieval art and literature, and isn't actually directly based on anything the Bible says.
You ever sat down and read this thing? Technically, we're not allowed to go to the bathroom.
Some people believe that when the Bible says eternal fire, it might not necessarily mean eternal torment. It could be that you had a soul, but it gets destroyed if you're a sinner. That would make this situation similar to nothingness. You don't experience suffering for eternity. You're just denied entry into the afterlife. But for this video, I'll consider the most common interpretation of hell, some kind of eternal suffering. If that's hell, I don't think my placement here will be particularly surprising.
Yeah,
It's
right?
safe to say that suffering is bad. It's like burning my hand on a hot stove, like I mentioned earlier. We have an immediate, absolute aversion to the conscious experience of suffering. It's a fundamentally negative state of being. And not only does suffering suck, but our damnation would, in fact, be eternal. When I talked about heaven, I came to the conclusion that immortality itself comes with downsides, even if you're free to do whatever you want, or experience intense bliss. Here, all the bad things about eternity are combined with a constant state of suffering. Bottom tier.
Yeah, 3. Okay. Right. That makes sense. Oh, a ghost? That's ass. I'm not gonna lie. That's ass.
Ghosts, apparitions.
I have a
phantoms,
problem with the
specters.
Bible. I don't have a problem with it, but I have a problem with how much power people put in it. Really just that. I mean, I think it's just another one of those ways to like have like I feel like reading the Bible could still be good for you, but I don't know. I feel like I don't know. Yeah.
Spirits.
Ghouls. Son of a bitch.
Surprisingly, something
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, so I don't know. And like I used to be much more hardcore about it when I was younger, but as I'm getting older, like, I'm realizing. First of all, I feel like they use certain stories and stuff to depict certain things, and I just feel like it would be a good read. But like I also feel like it's important to kind of detach from it as you read it. The way it's written. What you mean? Like the purpose? Like what you mean? I'm questioning. I'm questioning the like the authority it has like over people's uh like like they're thinking like I don't know. I don't know. I still think it's good and like I don't mind that it has authority. Like for example, like it teaches. I feel like you know you read the Bible and shit. Those type of people tend to be more disciplined and all of that. I feel like that's good, but I'm saying the aspect where like I just feels like if it boxes in your frame of thinking too much, as far as your potential and what you're able to do. Um, because we live in an imperfect world, so and it may say that in the Bible, but I don't know. It's like, and that's what I'm saying. Oh, that too. Any other religion is like, yeah, yeah. I'm about to say I've been like when I was like 15, like I realized like, bro, if you were born in the upbringing of any other religion, what you're just what going to hell like that doesn't. That's what I'm saying. I wasn't finna subscribe to a religion that's teaching that type of thing and producing those type of people that are not like. I feel like shit. People from other religions are even more understanding when it comes to certain shit. Like that's what I don't understand. Like, but I feel like every religion has its own like. I don't know. I respect everything. I respect all the shit to be honest. Like I feel like practicing beliefs and all of that in itself shows it takes discipline. You know, it takes faith, hella faith, hella faith. It takes hella faith, bro. You gotta really think like it takes hella faith to just sit there and just keep. You don't know what's true. Like I'm a thinker. I'm a thinker. Like I don't know what's true, my nigga. I'm just sitting here just, you know, and then like as I'm hearing like Buddhism, blah 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 blah. Those like every other thing, spirituality. Like I'm hearing all these things, and it's like it's just so much to the world. Like how can I sit here and I don't know. I just think it locks you in too much. Yeah, I believe. I don't know what I believe. Sure, I don't know, but I believe that there's only one God. You just have a different name. What you mean? Oh, like I just think there's just certain shit we just don't have answers for. Like low key, like it does definitely feel like there's a higher power because you know of the um, just the just the coincidences and the like so many things that happen and like the way that the universe is lined up and then the way just shit just happens. Oh yeah. Like I see what you're saying. Yeah. Um, or maybe not a person per se, but like an entity or a certain type of energy or a all encompassing consciousness or I don't know. Like that's what I'm saying. That's why it's such a tricky topic because this is beyond something we can prove. So whatever.
Like 18% of Americans believe they've had an encounter with a ghost. If you were a ghost, you would be condemned to exist in the realm of the living. No clipping.
But like afterlife as a ghost is crazy. Like you die and then you're a ghost.
If you were a
like
ghost.
That's
You
pretty
would be
butt.
condemned
That's
to
pretty
exist
butt
in
in
the realm of the living. No clipping through surfaces and witnessing your loved ones going through their lives. Maybe this is some kind of limbo state before you go to some afterlife. But for now, we'll just consider the ghost life. The only way you can communicate with people is with a Ouija board, which, by the way, is created by Hasbro, the same company that makes Monopoly and Connect.
Wait, what?
By the way, life. The only way you can communicate with people is with a Ouija board, which, by the way, is created by Hasbro, the same company that makes Monopoly and Connect 4. Your only
That's crazy. Stuff like this is just questions that we can't answer. Yeah. Yeah, bro. I enjoy talking about it, especially with like being like, because I'm grateful with the mind that I was able to, one, I had the opportunity to build over a certain period of time, and certain play of genetics. But like, I'm glad like, I'm able to talk about different beliefs and different things without being so tied to my own. Especially when we talk about religion and different perceptions of what afterlife is and God and shit. But like, that's the thing. That's the thing. Like, that's also the limitations of humanity. That's one of the things that I've also realized, bro. We may not just be human. Like, see, that's another thing. We may not just be human, but nigga, we're going off what we know and what we can prove that we're human. There's limitations to that. You feel me? The brain is only the brain. If you ever seen somebody that's missing parts of their brain, they are missing function. So we're only is. I mean, I feel like obviously certain physical. Okay, like certain physical things can produce certain spiritual. Like it's like two sides of one. Yo, come on, yo. Nah. I don't know. That shit is crazy though. Like that clarity is crazy. I don't know why that exists or whatever, but nigga, but no, bro. Look, I'm trying to think because I lost track of my thought. But basically, bro, like the brain it exists a certain way. Its ability to even evolve, or no, its evolution. First of all, its evolution over what 50,000 years we've existed. Boom, its evolutions over that period of time, and it like the fact that we have the parts of the brain that we do allows us to think in the ways we do, think about the future. They say we think in 4D, because we have the ability, the conception of time, or the perception of time. Shit. But with that also comes limitations. I feel like for that few minutes or seconds, you feel it. Yeah, no, okay. That may be how you interpret it. Is I feel like is more like um it's like harmony. It's almost like harmony. It well like I feel like it's like a harmony, like a harmonic type feeling mixed with like like your dopamine, like, and then like I'm trying to think, like, cause like it really is like a feeling, like boom, damn, like I understand like I don't need, because it's sometimes when you understand something, I feel like sometimes you can understand something without it, like without it being detailed. Like it's more of like a rough understanding, like, and you're okay with that. I feel like if only we could achieve that mentality whenever you want it. I mean, you can, or you can achieve whatever mentality you want, or nigga, plus some. Really, if you put in the work, like you just gotta just like imagine. Okay, like somebody used to do. Like imagine if you, let's say, like boom, that thought you had, boom. If we could only achieve that mentality whenever you want. Okay, picture that mentality, that state or the frame of mind you're trying to be in, and like try to stay of conscious. Like I give you a task, try to stay conscious of that frame of mind the entire day, no matter what you do, right? Preferably a busy day, preferably a work day. Now, you do that over a course of period of time. That's something like the fact that we even have the ability of the fact that our consciousness is able to even like humans are some. That's what I'm saying. There has to be some type of creator or outside entity or something, because the way everything is planned, when we like the fact that we even are able to understand the world fundamentally is crazy, bro. We're still animals, bro. Like I don't know.
only line.
And then there's questions about like the evolutionary theory, like whether or not if our DNA got tweaked from, like that's what I'm saying. Like it's just too much. That's why I kind of exist and understand there's just limitations to what we can know and limitations to, especially now as a regular person. Like I may stream and stuff, but I don't have access to certain information, and like there's just certain things I won't know. And even if I do get access to that information, who's to say that I can even, you feel me? So that's why I just kind of just live, bro, and try to enjoy my time.
Kind of communication to your relatives. Is
That's a
some
kind of,
13-year-olds
it's not giving
trying
up,
to
but it's kind
induce
of
a
being content
paranormal
and grateful
experience at 3
because
a.m. I feel like that would get
sometimes
pretty
you don't need
frustrating.
answers to things.
Maybe
man.
you'd be
And I feel like
condemned to
that's where a lot of humans go wrong. Like, bro, sometimes you don't need answers to certain things, bro. Sometimes you could just live, bro. You could just, you feel me?
haunt a
You can
particular
just,
location
you don't
for
really
some
need.
reason. Maybe you were murdered in a particular
But
house, and now
I feel
you
like
have
it
to
makes
spend
people feel
eternity
comfortable
shifting
and,
around
like,
items on the counter to freak out whoever
Yeah, it's a
happens
sense
to
of
live in that house
growth
in
too.
the
You can look at
future.
that as
Maybe
it's
some
just a growth too. I recently got to know that our dimension is the third dimension. Wait, I recently got to know that our dimension is the third dimension is made up of infinite dimensions, two dimensions stacked up upon one another. What you mean? Like, the third dimension is made of infinite two dimensions stacked up on up upon one another. So like if I so what the so what the fourth dimension would be that damn tetrahedron or whatever that bullshit is. But see, that's what I'm saying. And oh yeah, that shit too. So I'm glad that when we look at the second dimension and then yeah. When we look at the second dimension and then we we see how it would, like how the third dimension would manifest within the second dimension. I'm glad that we have shown test that, because then we could theorize, how the fourth dimension may intersect with the third dimension. But also the problem with see, that's the thing. There's just limits, bro. There's literally just limits, bro. I feel like there is just natural limits given. Like I don't know what possible reason there could be, but nigga, it could be too much like information or too like complex, like bro. But the fourth dimension is just something we just can't understand. Like you literally can't you can't, like it's not really, I don't know. God is pinnacle, but we the third dimension creature. We can't understand that shit. So that's why I say when we theorize this shit and we theorize about what it may be, I don't know. Especially when we theorize about stuff we can't prove, like ever, like bro. That's what I'm saying. I don't know if that's gonna stay the same. Like we're never gonna be able to prove those things, but like I don't know. That's why I'd just rather live, because like niggas
The
good.
guy is being too much
I'm
of
not
a
finna
greedy
shit.
capitalist on Christmas.
I'd rather
and you need to visit
I'd
him
rather
one
live
night
my
and
life,
show him
you feel
visions,
me?
teaching him about
Hey,
the errors of his
nah,
ways,
but nah, for
and
real though.
inspiring him to care more for others during the holiday
There's just certain
season.
things we can't understand,
In
even
any
though
of these
as
cases,
intellectual
I think this would be a pretty bad existence. The stuff you're
see what does the Bible say? God created us or we're supposed to be like blueprints of God. Is that what I've seen? Like in the Bible, I keep hearing like, oh yeah, God created us in the image of Himself. So if that's the case, which I can kind of see, because you got to think about it, everything we have that's human meant, understand, except our limits. Yeah, thank you. Everything that maybe we don't have limits. Yeah, and see, I choose to think that, but I choose to also think I don't know. it's like yo, I'm always balanced. Like it's always internal. But yeah, no. So look, so with God creating us in images of Himself, like everything we see is a thought. Like everything we see around us was once a thought, right? By another human, meaning that it didn't exist, right? Or maybe we don't have limits. I mean, it depends on in what way you're talking about. Like, I don't think we have like, I mean, we might have a limit to, we have a limit we have a limit to creation. Like, we can't just spawn some out of our hands, but, like, I feel like we have a creation ability similar to God, like, in a sense. So, like, the fact that everything that we see around us was a thought, and, like, the fact that we can hold on to the intangible just by putting a label on it, and the fact that we can understand certain things, and the fact that we can even understand, put labels on the universe and everything around us so much to the point where we can evolve as a planet and keep evolving to the point where we can understand more. I mean, I kind of, I see how we could be images of God, but at the same time, I don't know. There's just so many, like, it's just,
able to
I'm not
do
even finna
would
get
get
into
really
it.
boring really quick. It's not quite as bad as hell with the whole eternal suffering thing, but I'll still put it in bottom tier.
Yeah, that is bottom tier though. Reincarnation? Yes, God. That's like
What
that's like A
incarnation?
tier
It's
for me.
time to talk about reincarnation. Incarnation, more like the United States of America, with their lack of walkable cities and reliance on the automobile. Incarnation. Reincarnation is when you die and then start a new life in a different body.
I mean, I
repeating
think
the
it's
cycle
but
of
in the
life and
sense
death
that,
for
like, you might
eternity.
not remember,
This idea
obviously,
is
but
very, very old, and there are a lot of different takes on how exactly it might work.
because energy doesn't die. So where, you feel me? Energy doesn't die. So where does it transmute to?
According to the Hindu tradition, we
What
all
is
have
the
souls.
spark within? We run out of electricity. So where's the spark within us? Like, where does that go? What is? Because yeah, fine, yeah, we may be physical 3D meat, like our meat body, like our bodies are meat, but there's there's energies that we can't see, and meaning energies that we can't see, and first of all, energies that we can't see and understand. There's things that we don't understand still, so that probably covers, like, you see what I'm saying? So like that mixed with the fact that there's like a whole spiritual side of probably the world that we can't even process. Also, our consciousness and soul, whatever you want to call it, that's an energy. Like, that's not replicable. That's not, like, you can't just
They get passed along through lifetimes, which explains how there's continuity from one life to the next. In very early Hindu culture, there was an almost Christian understanding of an afterlife, with a heaven and
You know, that just made me think about how like, where does that energy come from? Like, consciousness in general. Like, when things move, like, for some to move on its own, I understand it has to have living, like, organs and or like certain parts for it to be able to move, and a brain or a processing system or something, whatever, right? And, down to the micros, it gets to, by cells and stuff, whatever. But like, that spark that actually, like, that understanding, like where to go, decision, like that, like Like, pretend you just turn off your body. Like, pretend you just, like, you, pretend your body just doesn't exist. Like, that, like, because humans, okay, fine, you can say, oh, yeah, everybody's genetics are different. Oh, everybody's different. Everybody goes through different life. But I'm pretty sure they did test that, like, bro, people will still express themselves like differently. Like, it's like, I don't know. It's just like I don't know. I don't know. I don't know.
Depending on how good of a person
Like, I don't
you
have
are
the
in
answers
life,
for it, but
you
it's just
end up
something I
in one
feel
of
like.
those places. But some people thought that this was too black and white. People aren't either good or bad as a whole. It's a gradation. Being good and being evil has levels to it. If you're like a slightly alright person, you'll end up in heaven with Mother Teresa and Mahatma Gandhi. But if you're a bit of a bad dude, you'll end up in hell with Hitler. This doesn't really seem fair. But reincarnation kind of fixes this. You end up reincarnating into a new existence, directly proportional to how good you are. If you're a decent enough guy, you'll get a decent reincarnation. But if you're really min-maxing your karma, you'll get a pretty sweet reincarnation. But for the Buddhists, there isn't actually anything concrete like a soul that's carrying over. Buddhism has the famous teaching of no self, or anatman, which is the idea that nothing in the world has any kind of permanent essence to it, including our personhood. For the Buddhists, what we think is our self is composed of the 5 aggregates: form, the body, perception, consciousness, feeling, and fabrication. These structures are impermanent, but in the cycle of existence, that's what's being carried over into the next life. You can think of it kind of like the band King Crimson. Over the years, a lot of the members have left the band, and new ones have joined. After a few years, none of the founding members were there anymore. It's all new people, but it's still King Crimson. This is what the mind is like in Buddhism. There's no tangible core or identity to it, because it's constantly changing over time. Another example is the ship of Theseus. Imagine a ship. After a while, some of the boards start getting a bit weak, so they're replaced with new ones. New screws, new sails, everything. Eventually, every single component of the ship has been swapped out, but there's still continuity there. Ultimately, through extensive meditation and contemplation, you can achieve enlightenment, which frees you from this cycle of life and death, and you achieve nirvana. Some ancient Greek philosophers also believed in a kind of reincarnation, but they called it metempsychosis, coming from meta, to change, and empsychon, putting a soul into. Pythagoras is probably the most famous guy from this tradition that seemed to believe in it. There was an anecdote about a puppy being beaten, and Pythagoras jumped in to stop it. He argued that when he heard the dog yelping, he recognized the soul of one of his friends. So would reincarnation be desirable? Well, for me, it kind of solves both the problems of nothingness and immortality. When you die, your conscious experience doesn't cease to exist, so there's no deprivation of experience into the future. And it also wouldn't exactly get boring. Every new life presents you with a new mode of experience.
Reincarnation.
New friends, new things to do. Maybe in my next life I'll be an orangutan running around. Or maybe I'll be a famous musician. Who knows? And if getting reincarnated isn't really your bag, you can just get enlightened and break from the cycle. This all seems pretty good. A tier.
Here is a simple remote job you could start without a college degree that pays more than a doctor's salary. If you're in your
What the fuck?
You die, and then immediately begin the same life again. Everything is exactly the same. You make all the same decisions. You make all the same mistakes. You work the same job. You have the same friends. And you die in the exact same way. Just to do it all over again for eternity.
Oh shit. Here we go again.
This is the famous philosophical
Nigga, that's
idea
real?
of eternal return, or eternal recurrence. It started with the Stoics, who you might be familiar with from all the self-help stuff on
Nigga, fuck out of here, bro.
internet, but it really took off when Nietzsche brought it up. His first reference to it is a thought experiment in The Gay Science. It goes like this. One day, to it is a thought experiment.
Nigga, The Gay
in
Science?
It goes like this. One day, a demon visits you and says,
hey man, this life you're living right now, you're gonna live this same life an infinite amount of times, and there won't be anything new.
Would you hate this, or would you accept it? He expanded on this some more in
I would
Thus
accept that
Spoke
shit.
Zarathustra. The main character starts off pretty terrified at the prospect of eternal recurrence, but eventually they get over it and end up embracing it. Now it's interesting to note that Nietzsche doesn't actually come out and say that he believes this is the case. He's not making any concrete metaphysical claim. He's just throwing it out there as a possibility. What this thought experiment is doing is more concerned with your reaction to that possibility. If it terrifies you, you probably aren't living the kind of life you actually want to live. But if you embrace it, you're probably on the right track. But what if this is actually the case? When you die, everything resets back to when you were first born, and you go through all the same experiences again. For me personally, this seems pretty good. At least so far. My life has been pretty enjoyable.
Yeah, low-key.
I had a happy childhood, and my early adult life has been interesting and rewarding so far. Assuming everything goes according
Low-key,
to
don't seem
plan,
that bad.
and my life continues to be fairly...
I mean,
good
it's
and accurate,
ass. No, don't get me wrong. It's ass, but...
I think I would be content living this life over and over again for eternity. I guess I passed Nietzsche's test. It might sound a little depressing to know that this life is all there is, but every time I live my life, it feels like it's the first time. Even if I've already had all these experiences in the exact same way, an infinite amount of times already, it still feels like the first time. All my experiences feel fresh and new. But with that being said, I have a pretty fortunate life, to the point that I'm basically as lucky as you can get. I had good life RNG. I'm a white straight man from Canada with enough money to live comfortably. I don't face any kind of oppression. I don't have any chronic pain. I have great friends and a loving family. But unfortunately, a lot of people aren't so lucky. If eternal recurrence is true, everyone who has ever suffered would have to live through that for eternity. Everyone who died in a famine, everyone who died in a war, would have to experience that over and over forever. If we're extending this to non-human animals too, every single factory farmed cow would have to live through that horrible existence for eternity. Every instance of suffering gets magnified an infinite amount of times. The same is true of positive experiences. You will have your first kiss an infinite amount of times. But the suffering makes it seem like that might not be 100% worthwhile. If I was ranking this based solely on my own experience, I would put this pretty high. But because of all the conscious suffering, I'll compromise and stick it in B.
Oh, I mean, that is the midway. So, yeah, B tier.
The simulation argument is really big among Silicon Valley guys pretending to be philosophers. But the actual simulation argument was laid out by a genuine philosopher, Nick Bostrom. The argument goes like this. He lays out 3 possible scenarios. In scenario 1, humans and other civilizations like ours probably won't advance technology far enough to create simulated realities, or creating simulated realities is impossible in the first place. In the second scenario, creating simulated realities is possible, but if a civilization creates one, it won't make a lot of them, because it requires too much processing power, or there's some other kind of limitation. And finally, creating simulated realities is possible, and there's no limit on how many get produced. These simulations would be entirely indistinguishable from ordinary reality. If we're in this scenario, we're almost certainly living in a simulated reality right now. The sheer number of simulated realities would outnumber actual reality by so much that the probability that we're in actual reality would be very close to 0.
What the fuck?
The sheer number of simulated realities would outnumber actual reality by so much that the probability that we're in actual reality would be very close to 0. Now, Bostrom's argument makes a lot of pretty hefty assumptions. The first one is that mental states don't depend on their physical instantiation. Our current conscious experience happens to emerge from biological neural networks in our brain.
Yeah.
But according to this view, this doesn't have to be the case.
The fuck?
If we could create a silicon processor in a computer with the exact same neural network, the same conscious experience would arise. Consciousness is a matter of information processing. There's nothing more going on. This is known as substrate independence. To be clear, this is a pretty controversial take. A lot of philosophers of mind believe that consciousness isn't reducible to computation. Some believe that consciousness does require a specific kind of substance for it to emerge, like a brain. But for the purposes of this argument, we'll assume substrate independence for consciousness.
Okay.
Bostrom also spends some time in his paper laying out some concrete numbers, showing how the simulation might be done. If it does end up being possible, it will be really hard. But if we assume that technology continues to progress and accelerate, it doesn't really matter how long it takes. Based on how much computing power it takes to replicate a single piece of neural tissue, we would need a computer that could perform about 10 to the 14 operations per second to replicate a human brain. Other estimates sit a bit higher, at 10 to the 16 or 10 to the 17. We'd have to generate some kind of environment for that brain too, and this really depends on how thorough we are with environmental simulation. At a minimum, we'd have to replicate the ordinary interactions humans might have with each other, or their environment. We couldn't program every single subatomic particle in the universe, so a lot of stuff would have to be left unrendered until a human came by to observe it. Based on all of this, along with a hypothetical computer design that could perform 10 to the 42 operations per second, Bostrom figures that civilizations in the distant future could indeed create simulations. There's nothing in principle preventing this from being possible. Now, for the record, I'm not personally sold on the simulation argument.
I'm not sold on it either, but
independence is true.
Yeah, me neither. Me neither. Because, like I said, it's conscious. So he's saying, like your brain, the way in which I understand streaming, could just be a whole bunch of zeros and ones. But the way I understand streaming also has an emotional connection, so that doesn't make sense. Like it's ties.
It's a guarantee.
And what? So what you can code? So what you can code my feelings for streaming into a computer and replicate? Like what? I mean, technically you can, but I mean like actually though, like you feel me? Like I don't know.
Developing forever.
Because you would then have to code 2007 and all the other that's not true. That's just not true. Substrate independence is shit. Substrate independence is shit.
End up destroying ourselves. This might be thousands of years down the line, but we need a lot of time to make a simulation. This would also explain why we haven't encountered any alien civilizations. It could be that civilizations tend to self-destruct. And even if we make it that far, and substrate independence is true, our future descendants might not even want to make simulations in the first place. Should we run a simulation of all the suffering in the world, if the beings in there have conscious experience just like us? If we created ancestor simulations of our whole civilization, we would be simulating famines, wars, and diseases as well. But for our purposes here, my take doesn't really matter. If we are in a simulation right now, what happens when we die? Maybe it's like the episode of Rick and Morty, where they play Roy. In this episode, Morty straps into a virtual reality game called Roy, where he lives through the entire life of a man named Roy. He lives through childhood, attends school, becomes a football star, gets married, has a child, spends years working at a carpet store, is diagnosed with cancer, beats the cancer, and then dies in an accident. He's then presented with a game over screen, and wakes up again as Morty. He's obviously confused because he just spent 55 years living this virtual life, only to realize that it was all a game.
See, that's scary.
In a Reddit thread about simulation and death, one smug Redditor put it this way. We take our VR headset off and go, wow, that was so real. Take a piss, and then put the VR headset back on, ready to play a new character. This VR game possibility is kinda similar to reincarnation at first glance. You get to live through a whole life, and then swap it out for a new one when you're done. But it's not exactly the same, because it's a solipsistic existence. None of the people you encounter in the simulation are real. They're just parts of the simulation, like NPCs in a video game. All the friends and connections you make are illusions. This kinda sucks. Maybe it's like the Matrix, where we wake up and realize we're just being harvested for our energy or something. At least everyone in the simulation is still an instantiation of a real person.
Yeah.
So all the connections you make are sort of real.
Yeah.
But I think this case is strictly bad. At the level of ultimate reality, you're just being distracted with this fake world so that you can be enslaved.
It's sick.
Okay, well, maybe we're all just a tiny portion of some kind of super AI god.
What the
The AI wanted to figure out how it was created, so it started running simulations of human civilization in the lead up to technological singularity. When we die, we just merge back into the AI God consciousness. And finally, maybe it's just the same as nothingness. Once our
Nigga, this is, bruh.
time in the ancestor simulation is over,
Can we
your
figure this?
consciousness ceases to
I don't know.
exist. None of these possibilities seem desirable to me, and every single one of them seems to diminish the value of our world pretty considerably.
Yeah.
We would all just be imitations of people who supposedly existed before the singularity happened. I'll put simulation in C tier.
Alright. This makes sense because of energy, the thermodynamic, the law of the thermodynamics. The law of thermodynamics.
Learn topics from everyday.
There's an old joke that goes something like this. The Dalai Lama walks up to a hot dog stand, and he says to the man running the stand, "Hey, make me one with everything." The idea that we're all one consciousness has the connotation of being a bit hippy-dippy. It's often associated with meditation practice, or other techniques that supposedly reveal this truth. But this idea is actually pretty old. It's part of the system of reincarnation in some schools of Hinduism, where deep down we're all God or Krishna. It also emerged a few times in the Western intellectual tradition. Schopenhauer talked about this kind of thing a lot, for example, and some pretty famous physicists have described similar things, including Erwin Schrödinger, Freeman Dyson, and even Einstein. Sometimes this idea is called open individualism, which is a term coined by Daniel Kolak. There isn't really much academic philosophy on the subject, but there are a number of books about it, and it actually has a pretty sizable community on the internet. In this view, there are basically three ways you can look at personal identity. First is closed individualism. You start existing when you're born, and you stop existing when you die. Everyone is a separate observer that exists moment to moment. This is how most people intuitively think about it. Next, there's empty individualism. Everyone has had the experience of trying to fall asleep, and suddenly, a cringy memory from your teenage years pops up. You're ashamed. You're embarrassed. What could you have possibly been thinking? It almost seems as if someone else had done it. But perhaps it was someone else. The you of the past. In every single moment, we're a different person. This is empty individualism. In this view, you're just a little dot on the timeline of your life. Each moment you exist is a different, unique entity that's constantly changing over time. We are just a moment of experience. And finally, there's open individualism. You are every moment of experience on everyone's timeline. The fact that some other entity is instantiating consciousness makes them identical to you. This might seem a little wacky at first, but stick with me here. Let's go back to closed individualism for a second.
Oh, shit. So like, the fact that everybody's adapting and changing along with you makes everybody the same. Right?
Person from birth to death.
I don't know. I feel like
what's holding it all together?
Because I never understood
Maybe
that.
it's memory. I remember some of the stuff I did when I was 10 years old.
That
My
I am
memory of
you,
who I
like,
used to
like
be
fully, like
is the
I think I get
continuity
it, like
between
on
all
a
the
conscious
moments of my
level, like
life.
we all
But
are.
this doesn't really work. We don't remember everything. That's not how memory works. I don't remember what I had for breakfast on New Year's Day of 2013. And there are also false memories. People can be convinced of experiences that they never actually had. Okay, so memory's out. Well, what about my body? I've had the same body since the time I was born. But once again, this doesn't really work. The cells that make us up are constantly changing over time, like a ship of Theseus. Same goes for the brain. So all of this kind of hurts closed individualism. We can't seem to point to anything that ties it all together. So should we opt for empty individualism? Well, maybe not. Even though there doesn't seem to be anything tying it all together, it definitely seems like there's continuity in our experience.
No, it is. It is.
But how can we get over the weirdness of open individualism? Well, think about your conscious experience for a second. From our perspective, there's basically no gaps in our experience. We're unconscious all the time when we sleep, but there doesn't seem to be any transitionary nothingness in between. It's almost an instantaneous change from falling asleep to waking up. When I got my wisdom teeth removed, I remember laughing from the nitrous oxide as the surgeon prepared the equipment. And then, in the next moment, I was sitting in the recovery room. It was as if no time had passed. It was a seamless transition. This continuity lasts from our first experiences as children until the instant we die. And importantly, from our center of awareness, this block of experience doesn't have a beginning or end. We just kind of find ourselves in the world, as if we've always been here. Objectively, we weren't always here. but it feels like this awareness is a constant because it's all we are. The only stable thing about me is my immediate conscious experience. It's the only thing I can really point to and say, that's me, because my body, my memories, and everything else is constantly changing. But here's the kicker. That immediate conscious experience is the same thing that other people have to point to. What you call I is the same thing that I call I. Now, with all that being said, I'm not totally sold on open individualism. But once again, let's just roll with it. Let's say we are all the same person. We're an identical subject of experience, but we're just different parts of it. So what does this say about death? Well, one suggestion might be that when we die, the illusion ends. As MC Ride once said, my experience is a momentary lapse of reason. Our identification with ourselves as one particular human stops, and we return to the ocean of being. But what would this be like? Would we experience all conscious experiences that all beings are having simultaneously? Almost like you're sitting in front of a bunch of screens, watching every single experience play out. This is a pretty tricky thing to wrap your head around, and it's unclear whether this state of being would be positive, negative, or neutral. But you might also consider the fact that right now, you're only one instantiation of consciousness. Maybe instead of returning to some default, where you're everything at once, you cycle through every instance of consciousness. This picture might look something like the short story The Egg by Andrew Weir. In this story, the main character, you, die in a car crash. You meet God, who explains that you've already reincarnated loads of times before. In your next incarnation, you'll be a Chinese peasant girl in 540 AD. In fact, you've actually been reincarnated as every single human being who has ever lived. You were Abraham Lincoln, Adolf Hitler, and Jesus. You were also every Holocaust victim and every follower of Jesus. This whole process is meant as a kind of test. Once you've lived every single human life, you become a god just like him. The universe was created so that you understand that every time you hurt someone, you're really just hurting yourself. Every time you do something good for someone, you do it for yourself. This picture is a lot like reincarnation, but with a few key differences. First, it seems to be human only. You won't come back as a mosquito or a lion. And secondly, it doesn't seem to be tied to any kind of karma. You'll be cycling through every single human life, so the actions you take in your current life don't really have any meaningful bearing on your next lives, aside from the fact that you'll experience the other side of every interaction. This story also has a really important ethical implication that's kind of similar to the Veil of Ignorance thought experiment by John Rawls. Imagine you have no idea who you will be in society. You don't know your ethnicity, your gender, or your social status. Rawls argues that we should attempt to structure society from this perspective. Our principles should not be based on our current life and all the circumstances we happen to find ourselves in, but they should be based impartially, as if we could end up as anyone in society. The egg scenario is a lot like this because you're actually everyone. So the doctrine of do to others whatever you would like them to do to you takes on a very literal meaning because the others are also you. Now, this is a tricky one to rank. I'm not really sure what to think about returning to the ocean of being. It's hard to say what exactly that would be like. But as for the human-to-human exhaustive reincarnation idea, I think that's really great. You would quite literally get the full spectrum of human experience. Every instance of suffering, pain, joy, ecstasy, and love. I think that's easily the most interesting possible situation. S tier. So here's the final list. This video is not an exhaustive account of every possible situation that could happen when we die. I also don't
nothing
really
is but like, and there's nothing that's ass. Oh, okay, I'm gonna stand on that.